Welcome back to Assetto Corsa. Today we're actually taking a look at a relatively new track. This is something that came out in the end of March. It's Long Beach 2024, and he didn't even put screenshots into the overtake post. It's so new and fresh, but this is actually quite amazing. Very heavily detailed track and a lot of fun to drive. Although I'll kind of walk you through some of my experience with it because it is such an intense track. I saw something with this track that I haven't seen with any other tracks, and we'll talk through that. But let's go ahead and get out there and start showing you the track a little bit here. I'm in the Porsche 992 GT3 R, because that's a track that, or a car that I drive quite a bit, and figured that this would be a good car to take out on this track. The scenery detail is probably the most phenomenal aspect of this particular track mod, and for the most part it's fairly accurate from all reports. I don't know the side elements of this track well enough to comment one way or the other, but there was some commentary that there are a couple of things that he got wrong and a couple of things he got perfectly right. Some building changes and things that have happened over the years, but all in all, this is pretty crazy in terms of the amount of detail, visual detail that you get on this track. I've certainly not seen this amount of detail in any other model for Long Beach, making this probably one of the best that I've ever seen. Now, my problem, loaded this up, and I think partially because of the high level of detail, I started seeing a huge FPS drop. I mean, down to like 20s, mid-20s. Like, what the heck is going on? Nothing had changed in my system. I had just driven a couple of other tracks that were visually just stunning and had none of these problems. I checked my video drivers. I checked a whole bunch of settings, tinkering with extra effects, grass effects, mirrors, shadows, everything you can possibly imagine in the Assetto Corsa setup. Could not figure out what was going on. And I was seeing this thing in the final image, main pass, for my center screen. Opaque car setting that was just like jacking it up and costing like, you know, 70 frames per second in terms of performance hit. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Did some research and said, okay, this is usually tied to cars being rendered on track, not your car. So if it's a single car setup like we're doing here, it should be negligible. Multiple cars, you know, it can start to cost performance. Well, like, I'm not rendering any cars. And then I realized that Two Real Traffic, the traffic planer, was on. And though it was not rendering any cars on track, at least none that I could see anywhere, it was just beating the crap out of this track's performance, rendering, I think, 300 cars, 250 cars. Turned that slider down to none, no cars. FPS jumped right back up. And it's not as, again, the level of detail on this track, I think that I am still taking a pretty big FPS hit. Because I'm only rendering, I think it looks about 85 frames per second right now. Which is not bad, all things being equal. But mid-20s was definitely not cool. Nothing quite as frustrating as an issue that pops up that doesn't exist anywhere else. Can't quite put your finger on what's causing it. And that, my friends, is Assetto Corsa, by the way, on a PC at least. Because you can mod things and change things, and, you know, you're sometimes dealing with tracks that maybe aren't optimized properly, or are so heavily detailed that they have a performance hit that other tracks just don't have. Rooting out those issues is sometimes complicated and difficult, and I've been recently asked to consider administrating an Assetto Corsa league, and that's my number one concern, is that if you get people that are maybe new to Assetto Corsa, haven't tinkered around with it very much themselves, you wind up, if you're running a league where people are competing, you're going to encounter new types of issues when people are trying to render multiple cars on track and compete. The netcode ramifications of that are pretty significant as well. But supporting that, being able to say, okay, in some of the other sims, you can tweak settings, but you don't get much variability in terms of performance. Once you get things dialed in, they're pretty well dialed in. For the most part. I guess that isn't universally true. There have been some tracks that have not been fully optimized, released for things like iRacing, that have had a performance hit that you've had to tweak around, but not as significantly as Assetto Corsa, not as frequently as Assetto Corsa. So my concern is that, you know, you have people that maybe be new to Assetto Corsa trying to come in and play with it, and would get very quickly demoralized and wouldn't have the resources available to them to have, you know, supportable driving experience in the same way that they do with other sims. And that would very quickly lead to a lot of frustration and drop out from a league. Kind of a pessimistic or cynical way of actually looking at that, but I think it's realistic, because I've become an Assetto Corsa expert to a certain level, at least, just by tinkering and having to solve out, you know, problems with different mods and figure out what's going on with my device drivers, and, you know, all sorts of, you know, weird things have popped up. And I'm a technologist. I feel pretty comfortable tinkering, but not everybody does. Not everybody needs to. And sometimes I have my challenges and misgivings around Assetto Corsa just in general, from a tinkering standpoint. That's actually why I avoided this sim for so long. I've gotten really comfortable with it, and I enjoy driving it now. I avoided it for a really long time because I just didn't like the requirement that, you know, you load something up and you wind up having to spend 2 hours to solve a problem. And that can happen. You can miss a race because, you know, something gets out of sorts, and you have to troubleshoot it and solve the problem. So I've talked a lot about Long Beach. In a lot of my street circuit videos. It's one of my favorite tracks, along with Belle Isle. Belle Isle is another one that I really, really enjoy. I love this track. I've never been able to do particularly well in a race here. I think my best race, or most enjoyable race, memorable race, was with North America Racing League here in a GT3 R. And I finished the race, I think, in like 15th, 16th place. In a pretty competitive field, so I didn't feel bad about that. But this track is unforgiving in some really interesting ways, but it's also very rewarding when you get it right. And different cars handle differently on this track, which is kind of interesting. Like this car, you want to stay off the curbing. If you're on the curbing, you're gonna have an interesting bumpy ride on exit. The cup car, you can throw it over the curbs and it actually absorbs them and enjoys it, and you can eat up this track pretty well. Prototypes, you also want to stay off the curbs for the most part. There are a few curbs that you can take. But now that I'm actually seeing this in full render, went too hot into turn 1, cost me a lot of time. Yeah, I can definitely enjoy this track now. When I was driving it in like a stop action way, it was no fun. No, not even a little. And all the way down to neutral there. So bad. Managed to salvage that lap to be a decent one. Could have been so much better, though. Get into the 21s. I'm not very fast here. There we go. Personal best. So that's Long Beach. I really do like this track. I think the level of detail around the track is very immersive. And that's important, whether you're racing or out just doing laps. The immersion piece of it helps you get locked in and, you know, drive it like a real race car. And that's pretty incredible. That's also why, you know, like dealing with the issues of the frame rate, you know, are pretty important, is that if it's jittery and the details become unclear, then that becomes less enjoyable. It's less immersive because, you know, you're dealing with, you know, what the hell's going on with my eyes. If you have bad eyesight, imagine taking your glasses off and doing a lap around here. That is kind of what a poor performing frame rate does. Is everything just looks horrible. So that's Long Beach 2024 on Overtake. I'll put the link in the description, and hopefully you can download it and enjoy it too. Sorry for such gray skies, but this is actually real weather in Long Beach right now. I guess it's a little bit overcast. Life in the big city, I guess. But it was fun to drive. At least I thought it was. I hope it was as much fun for you. And I appreciate you taking the time to join me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now.
Spaß machen Rennsport.